You obviously know what Benadryl is, right? So back in like 2020, there was a where you have to take a certain amount, like a dozen or more, to hallucinate. I don't recommend anybody to like obviously go do it. I'm not saying to go do it, but I'm just saying like people that would hallucinate on Benadryl, it would be bad trips overall. Like they would see spiders, they would see snakes, wasps attacking them. They would hear like familiar voices and unfamiliar voices talking to them, and they would see shadowy figures, and they will also see the Hat Man. Have you ever heard about the Hat Man?
The Hat Man, no.
It's a sleep paralysis demon. So people around the world has seen this for like years, bro. Websites dedicated to this, like people talking about their stories, stuff like that. Everybody would describe them the same way too, like a tall 6 to 8 foot
shit,
person.
bro. 6 to 8 foot.
He wears a fedora. You can't really see his face, only like 2 red eyes, and it's always like he's a shadowy figure.
And I remember a supporter actually talking about how they had sleep paralysis and they saw, saw a man with a hat outside of the window, bro. And keep in mind the window is like mad fucking tall.
So I do remember seeing a story about a therapist who had like a patient, and he would always say that he would.
This low-key made me even more scared because he was just talking about like a shadow person holding up the fucking curtain.
This man was killed by an atomic wedgie. Denver St. Clair and his stepson Bradley Davis had a strained relationship, and what started as a tense family argument spiraled into a gruesome and unexpected act of violence. That night, tempers flared and a verbal fight quickly turned physical. In a fit of rage, Brad attacked Denver with what he called an atomic wedgie, a prank turned horrifyingly lethal. He pulled Denver's underwear over his head with such force that the waistband wrapped tightly around his neck. The elastic waistband compressed Denver's airway, causing him to suffocate. When police arrived, they found a scene straight out of a nightmare: Denver's lifeless body, with his underwear still wrapped around his throat. Bradley Davis initially claimed it was an accident, but investigators were not convinced. The evidence pointed to a brutal and deliberate attack. The coroner confirmed the cause of death: asphyxiation due to the pressure on his neck. The force was so severe it left bruising and deep marks, a haunting reminder of an act that was both violent and humiliating. Brad Lee pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter, admitting he attacked Denver out of rage. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison for this awful crime.
The man you just saw in that video's name is Ricardo Lopez, but he's better known online as the Bjork Stalker. If you don't know, Bjork is an Icelandic singer, she's a pop star from her home country, and she's famous worldwide. But in the 1990s, a man from Georgia in the United States took an interest in Bjork and began planning a dark attack. At first, he started gathering information about Bjork, sending her fan letters, and he wrote all these delusions down in a journal. And as he continued writing in this journal, his thoughts descended into pure madness. Ricardo began expressing frustrations about his career as an exterminator. He ranted about how he couldn't get a girlfriend, discussed his feelings of inadequacy due to being overweight, and in the journal he made 408 references to Bjork, 34 references to unaliving himself, and 14 references to murder. In 1996, Ricardo saw that Bjork was in a new relationship with a new man, and he felt betrayed and decided he was going to kill her. At first, he planned on mailing her a bomb full of needles with HIV blood, but he decided that would be too hard, and he instead decided on a letter bomb filled with acid, hoping that it would either disfigure her or kill her, and that afterwards he'd take his own life and then they'd be reunited in heaven. So he constructed the bomb, mailed it off, then returned back to his house, painted his face red and green, and he then took his own life. After Ricardo's body was discovered, authorities intercepted the bomb package, and the package itself never even got close to Bjork. But this is truly just another story of stalking and obsession that really disturbs me. Stalking is such a major problem in the United States, and we do not have adequate enough laws to stop these sorts of things from happening. And the footage that Ricardo recorded on his camcorder detailing his whole journey is some of the most disturbing stuff you can possibly view.
Little girl vanished, and her chilling final phone call is absolutely terrifying. Her presumed fate is like something from a nightmare. It was the 6th of April 1986 in New Mexico when a small town was shocked by some horrifying news. 9-year-old Antoinette Cayedido had vanished in the middle of the night. Her mum was devastated to find that at 7 a.m. when she went into her bedroom, she was nowhere to be found. The little girl was actually always really responsible, and she was said to be very wise beyond her years, so there's no way she would just vanish on her own accord. Her mum, Penny, frantically ran round neighbours' houses asking if they'd heard anything or seen the little girl. When she had no luck, police were alerted. They scoured the area too and could find absolutely nothing. Straight away, investigators knew this screamed of a kidnap. Penny told officers that a local man named Emiliano Gardella, nicknamed Emo, had given the little girl flowers 3 times up until she vanished. He was questioned but denied any involvement. A man named Ron Perry, who knew the little girl's mum Penny, told police that at around 3:30 a.m. he'd actually knocked on the door of the family home and on a bedroom window. He said that he did this because he and Penny had had an argument and he wanted to just check on her and make sure she was okay. He said that he then left and spent the night at a friend's house who lived down the street, and the friend actually corroborated this story. Months went by and Antoinette's heartbroken family had to go on with absolutely no idea of what had happened to her. Finally, when all seemed lost and a year had gone by, police received a very chaotic phone call. A child was on the other end of the line claiming to be the missing girl. She said that she was in Albuquerque, but before police could get any more information, they heard a man shouting at her and the line suddenly went dead. Officers played Penny the recording and she stated, "I listened to that tape over and over and over, and just by the way she says her last name and the way she screamed sent chills all over my body. A mother knows, and I know that was her." Then 4 years later, there was a possible sighting of the little girl in Nevada. A waitress had been waiting on a table of a scruffy couple with a young girl. The waitress said that the little girl had strangely kind of dropped a utensil on the floor and it seemed to have been done on purpose, but she didn't think too much of it until the little girl actually put her hand on the waitress's hand. Again, she kind of didn't think too much of it and just went into the back. Then, after the 3 of them had left the restaurant, the waitress went over to clear the table and found a note. It said, "Please help me, call the police." Obviously, by that point, the 3 had gone. Then years later, one of Antoinette's sisters was interviewed and she actually said that she'd witnessed her getting abducted. She hadn't initially been interviewed because she was only 5 years old at the time. 2 men had apparently forced Antoinette into a brown van, and because this little girl was only small at the time, she said that she didn't tell anyone about this because she didn't want to upset her mum. Then the mum Penny's story changed dramatically. She admitted to having heard a knock at the door and having told Antoinette to go and answer it, and then said that about half an hour passed and she realised Antoinette hadn't come back. This was very different to her original story, which was that she just found in the morning around 7 a.m. that Antoinette wasn't there. She never said anything about making the little girl in the middle of the night go and answer the door. She then also said something extremely incriminating to the FBI. She said, "What if me and Emo did this? Would we both go to prison?" She apparently admitted to knowing who was going to come and take her daughter, as well as having kind of planned it and having told her to open the door like she said. Despite this, she was never charged and she passed away.
I also remember seeing another video from 2017 in Jalisco of a Jesus Christ statue moving in the middle of La Misa. You saw it? It's quick, it's in the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, like I said, I don't know how people want to take that kind of like a miracle in a way.
Yeah.
Or other people, you know, say it's like supernatural, creepy thing. It is paranormal, though.
Of course, yeah.
At the end of the day, bro, because if you see a statue or anything that's not human move, it gives you a little bit like of a...
Catches you off guard.
But what it reminded me of was a movie.
Oh, okay.
It's a very, very old movie. It's a vintage movie that I watched as a kid. It's called Marcelino Pan y Vino.
I've never seen that.
So what the movie is basic about is this little boy, he's an orphan. His name is Marcelino, right? He gets taken into this monastery with all the Catholic and religious monks. And obviously he's a kid, bro. So very mischievous. And one day he sneaks into the attic of the monastery.
Okay.
And he sees a giant crucifix of Jesus. And he starts talking to the statue. And eventually, over time of the movie, the statue starts talking back to him.
What the fuck?
Having regular conversation with him, saying like you shouldn't be bad and stuff. At the end of the movie,
there was a famous author named David, and he wrote multiple best-selling horror novels. He was praised for plot twists and surprise endings. He received large amounts of fan mail every single day, and many other authors sent him manuscripts in hopes that they would get their work published. But David took pleasure in stealing the ideas from amateur writers. If he came across a manuscript with a great idea for a story, he would use it in his own books and deny the author any credit. One day, David got a manuscript, and as he read the first chapter, he felt he knew how it was going to end. He continued reading, and as he got to the last chapter, he noticed the pages were stuck together. And, anxious to finish the story, he pulled the pages apart. David felt increasingly tired, but still wanted to finish the story. When David finished, the ending was exactly what he thought. He then made a mental note to steal the story. But suddenly, David noticed a note from the author saying this: "I knew you were going to steal this story. You did it to me before and blacklisted me from the whole industry and ruined my career and life. And now I'm going to get my revenge." You had to pull the pages apart to read, didn't you? Are you feeling tired? That's normal. It's one of the symptoms of arsenic poisoning. Soon your heartbeat will get slower and slower until it stops forever. Goodbye, David. Some twist endings can be very hard to predict.
Why? Dad, she's just a kid. She's 12. Do you know what people would say if they saw me skating with a 12-year-old? They'd say I was robbing the cradle.
That girl is gorgeous. She's beautiful.
When I first saw this clip circulating on social media, I just couldn't believe it. Here you have a man who's now known to be one of the most prolific sexual predators in Hollywood, discussing what seems to be a how-to guide on how to groom a child on national television. I know that people are going to say, oh, it was a different time and blah, 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 this was more acceptable. But I don't think that this ever should have been acceptable. I mean, I can't remember a single television show that I watched that had any sort of content that reflected a value like the one that's being presented here in this clip. Especially coming from the mouth of a guy like Bill Cosby. It's kind of like Jeffrey Epstein giving you dating advice. But I'm just going to play the rest of the clip for you now. This is just really disturbing.
Why? Dad, she's just a kid. She's 12. Do you know what people would say if they saw me skating with a 12-year-old? They'd say I was robbing the cradle.
That girl is gorgeous. She's beautiful.
I'm sorry, all I see is 12.
There's a certain age that you said to me, Dad, I'm going to party, and then when I'm burnt out, I'm going to look around for a woman to settle down with. Remember? What age is that?
24.
When you're 24, she will be around 20 or 21. And you're going to be looking around for somebody. Now, wouldn't it be nice to lay a little track and be nice to her so that she would remember you when you're 24?
All right, Dad. I mean, I'll do it. Only because it's your birthday.
Thank you.
And on my 24th birthday, if she turns out to be as beautiful as you say she will be, you have to find her and bring her to my party.
All right.
This woman held a farewell death party for her boyfriend prior to killing him. He sat there happily throughout the entire night, having no idea that that was the intention of the party. It was October 1995 and Joe Cinque was living in Australia. He'd grown up in Newcastle, had a younger brother, and the family were all super close. Now, Joe was extremely good looking, charismatic, he was sporty, he had everything going for him. He went to uni and then, as lots of people did, he went travelling afterwards. After coming back, he was on a night out with his friends and he bumped into a girl that he liked the look of. This was Anu Singh. The pair were really attracted to each other and seemed to be quite well suited. Anu was from a really good family background and so was Joe. The pair got into a relationship, and this wasn't Anu's first relationship. She'd actually dated a guy called Simon Walsh, and the pair had got pregnant. The pair decided to get rid of the pregnancy, which was particularly difficult on Anu. She ended up getting into some pretty hard substances in order to cope. It was around this point where she met Joe and got into a relationship with him. And you might be thinking that I've missed out a whole bunch of information about when Simon and Anu broke up, but the reality is they didn't. There was a definite crossover between Simon and Anu's relationship and Anu's and Joe's relationship. It wasn't until Simon found out that Anu was cheating on him that he broke it off with her and she sort of fully focused all her attention on Joe. This obviously wasn't the best start to a relationship, and Joe's parents really didn't like Anu. She was very controlling, and Joe seemed to really change sort of personality once he was in this relationship with her. She was getting more and more demanding of Joe and more controlling. The pair, though, did end up moving in together in Canberra, much to Joe's family's upset. They were even saving up to get married. Now, Anu was struggling with an ED at this point and was getting really sort of obsessed with going to the gym and taking certain kind of substances to help her lose weight. Things would get so bad that she ended up being involved with the local crisis team at some occasions just due to how bad her mental health was, but she was really reluctant to engage with the services. She ended up actually blaming Joe for her struggles, which was really, really strange because everybody around them could see that Joe had done nothing but stand by her the whole time and support her. She then started expressing really concerning desires to hurt people around her. Now, this included Joe and her ex Simon, as well as herself. She told multiple of her friends about these plans and wishes to hurt other people, but they didn't seem to actually do anything or reach out for any kind of help for her. Now, this was obviously not just a one-off kind of joke that she'd made, because weeks later she was still saying this, and also was asking friends if they could get her a gun so that she could unalive herself. The one friend in question apparently thought she was just joking. Then the plan changed. She decided to, instead of unalive herself with a gun, she wanted to use an HOD. Now, it's not clear whether she came up with this plan by herself or she had somebody advising her. In August 1997, it's believed that Anu had started asking a known substance user how she would OD someone with H. She then bought some H off this guy and told him that she was going to unalive somebody else and herself with it. It's alleged that Anu's friend, Madhavi Rao, knew all about this and even helped her to get hold of some other substances to effectively sedate Joe. That's when, in October 97, Anu decided to host a farewell party for her and Joe. However, she didn't tell Joe the real reason for holding this party. She just told all of the other people that they invited. She allegedly invited Madhavi and some other friends who allegedly also all knew the plan, but were kind of told to stay quiet about it, and they didn't really know if it was a joke or not. Once the guests had left, Anu crushed up a tablet into Joe's drink to knock him out. She then went to get the syringe to complete the task, but the H had congealed in the syringe, so she wasn't able to go ahead with it. Following this first failed attempt, Joe had no idea what had gone on and how close he came to death. Anu then scheduled another dinner party just days later. She tried to put the same plan in motion, but again she failed. And then on the morning of the 26th of October, on the third attempt at killing her boyfriend, after Anu bought even more substances to use, Joe lay unconscious in their home. Anu rang her friend in a bit of a panic and asked her what to do, and she said to ring the ambulance. In an infuriating 911 call, she told the operator that there was somebody there that was potentially experiencing an OD and that he was vomiting blood. She wouldn't tell them what the address was, and frustratingly, the operator had to keep asking her, just tell me what the address is. She kept asking the operator if he was going to be okay. Well, no, he's not going to be if you don't tell them the address. She admitted to police administering the substances, and she was reportedly hysterical when they arrived. She was charged with murder but tried to claim that she wanted to unalive herself and wanted to incapacitate Joe so that he wouldn't stop her. Anu was eventually found guilty of manslaughter, and she served only 4 years of a 10-year sentence. Madhavi was initially charged with murder and administering substances, but was acquitted.
Hammer coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Do you know about the Harry Potter actor that got sent to prison? You may remember Jamie Waylett, who played the Hogwarts bully Vincent Crabbe in the Harry Potter films. Although for many actors this would be a dream come true to be in such well-known films, Jamie reportedly struggled with the fame. He began to use substances in order to cope with his mental health struggles. In 2012, London saw some of the most devastating riots, including looting and arson, as well as the deaths of 5 people. Jamie was arrested for being involved in the riots. He was pictured getting involved in looting and holding a bottle full of petrol. He was also with a gang of at least 4 people who went into Chalk Farm on the 8th of August. He also had a previous conviction for substance possession at that time. In 2012, he received a 2-year sentence for violent disorder and 12 months for handling stolen goods. It's believed that since being released from prison, he hasn't been in any big films.
These are videos that will give you new fears, part 1. The video I'm about to show you shows a Malaysian man getting stuck inside of a water slide. He came to an abrupt stop twice, which made him call out for help and start to panic. Just imagine this happening to you, and here's the video. So yeah, I could never imagine getting stuck in a water slide like this, and my claustrophobia will be going crazy. I honestly never want to go on a water slide again after seeing this video.
You obviously know what Benadryl is, right? So back in like 2020, there was a where you have to take a certain amount, like a dozen or more, to hallucinate. I don't recommend anybody to like obviously go do it. I'm not saying to go do it, but I'm just saying like people that would hallucinate on Benadryl, it would be bad trips overall. Like they would see spiders, they would see snakes, wasps attacking them. They would hear like familiar voices and unfamiliar voices talking to them, and they would see shadowy figures, and they will also see the Hat Man. Have you ever heard about the Hat Man?
The Hat Man, no.
It's a sleep paralysis demon. So people around the world has seen this motherfucker for like years, bro. Websites dedicated to this, like people talking about their stories, stuff like that. Everybody would describe him the same way too, like a tall 6 to 8 foot person.
Bro, 6
he
to
wears
8
a fedora. You can't really see his face, only like 2 red eyes, and it's always like he's a shadowy figure.
And I remember a supporter actually talking about how they had sleep paralysis and they saw, saw a man with a hat outside of the window, bro. And keep in mind the window is like mad fucking tall.
So I do remember seeing a story about a therapist who had like a patient, and he would always say that he would.
This Loki made me even more scared because he was just talking about like a shadow person holding up the fucking curtain.
Did you know that Gino D'Acampo actually served time in prison? Many people in the UK absolutely love Gino, who is well known for appearing on daytime television. However, many people don't know that he does have a criminal past. This true crime case honestly reads like a bizarre fan fiction. In 1998, way before he ever appeared on ITV's This Morning, Gino was 21 years old. He was an unknown waiter living in North London. He broke into the home of well-known 80s singer Paul Young. He was known for having hits such as Wherever I Lay My Hat. Gino stole Paul's guitar collection, which was reportedly worth around £4,000. He also stole his platinum disc. Police investigating the crime found that Gino had actually unknowingly left his DNA at the crime scene. He dropped a cigarette butt with his DNA on it. They were able to match this DNA to Gino, and he was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Gino actually reached out to Paul personally to apologise to him just prior to entering the I'm a Celebrity jungle back in 2009. Gino stated that he was involved with the wrong people back then and was on the wrong path.
These are videos you can never watch. Not sleeping tonight.
This woman was relaxing on a Royal Caribbean cruise trip, and then she disappeared without a trace a minute later to never be seen again. Or so we thought. The woman behind me is Amy Bradley. Her father was Ron Bradley, and he was observing her just hanging out and sleeping on the cruise. This is around 5:30 a.m. Then all of a sudden he looked back again and she was gone. The father notified everyone on the ship and the authorities immediately. There was a 4-day search for her all over the coast, and there was no trace of her anywhere. Some people suspected that she may have fallen off of the ship and drowned or something like that, or she got swept away by the tide. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. An officer in the US Navy visited a brothel in Barbados and found a woman there claiming to be Amy Bradley. She was begging him to help, saying that she could not leave the brothel because she wasn't allowed to. So now the question is, was Amy Bradley trafficked, and how did that even happen on a cruise ship? Now here's the even sadder part. The US Navy officer didn't even report this at the time. He waited until he was retired because he thought he would get in trouble going to a brothel. So the family didn't find out until way later when he finally came forward. And by that time, the brothel was long gone. However, the family did get a mysterious email from a woman claiming to be Amy. And apparently they stumbled upon an SW website where they saw her. These were like listings, so unfortunately their daughter was definitely trafficked. This just makes me realize how horrible this world is, how scary it can be. Stay safe out there, guys. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. And as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
This girl killed her mum so that she wouldn't find out she got kicked out of school. On the 3rd of March 2020, police were called to do a welfare check at a property in Ohio. Brenda Powell lived in the house, the 50-year-old mother of Sydney Powell. Brenda had actually been on the phone with Sydney's former school. This was the University of Mount Union. Now, during the telephone call, a staff member heard repeated thuds and screaming, so authorities were alerted. Inside, they found Brenda Powell in a serious condition. She was rushed to hospital but died from her injuries. Brenda had been unaware that her 19-year-old daughter had been kicked out of the school. During her telephone conversation, Brenda was struck in the head and then stabbed nearly 30 times by Sydney. However, when police investigated the murder, Sydney tried to claim that there had been a break-in. She told them that there had been a noise and her mum had instructed her to run away. She said she heard screaming, and when she ran back in, her mum was on the floor. Investigators saw through her lies and she eventually changed her story. At her trial, she pled not guilty by reason of insanity. Her defence argued that Sydney was suffering from undiagnosed schizophrenia. They stated that she killed while experiencing a psychotic episode. However, it is rare for people with schizophrenia to act violently. It was concluded that Sydney had been exaggerating her symptoms. She's recently been found guilty and is awaiting sentencing.
This is proof we aren't alone. Okay, so this alien-looking creature was recently captured on video, and it literally shapeshifts and it's glowing all these crazy colors. Is this beautiful or terrifying? Here's the video. So yeah, what do you think about this? I have no idea what this is, but it's absolutely terrifying. And this is also 4,000 feet in the ocean.
So I'm randomly scrolling on TikTok and I found this post claiming that they found the Malaysian aircraft that crashed 10 years ago, MH370 to be exact. And I was like, wait, pause. There's no way it's that intact after that many years. So I went to Google it, and of course, it's fake. This video did have a ton of views and likes though, 826,000 likes. But if we look closer at this video, this looks very AI generated. Like they definitely typed in like Malaysian flight MH370 crashed, retro filter, or something like that. I feel like dropping from an altitude and hitting the ocean from that high, you know, feels like concrete after 40 feet. The plane would be shredded and torn apart. But I did find an article that Malaysia did authorize a new hunt for the aircraft. They're getting help from a robotics company. They might be using sonar and other things to try to help and find the plane's location. But it still remains a mystery today how this plane even vanished. And honestly, where did this plane even go? I don't think they found any debris from the crash site, did they? And this felt like it happened yesterday, literally 10 years ago. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Will they ever find this plane? Let me know what you guys think. And as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
This man shot his colleague's boyfriend after she rejected him. 37-year-old Kevin Prasad worked with Thandar Singh at San Francisco International Airport. The pair had been working together for years, and multiple times Kevin had asked Thandar out on dates. She always rejected his advances. She was happily in a relationship with 31-year-old Mark Mangakat. The pair even had a 3-year-old daughter and soon planned to move to Vegas. Despite his interest in his girlfriend, Kevin never actually had an argument or a disagreement with Mark. There were no warning signs for what was to come. On the 25th of April 2018, Mark went to the airport to pick his girlfriend up from work. Little did he know he was being followed. Kevin had hatched a murderous plan to stop his crush moving away with her boyfriend. Kevin and an alleged accomplice, Donovan Rivera, followed the pair home that day. As Mark was reversing his car into the garage, Kevin fired shots into the car. This killed Mark, and it is a miracle that no bullets hit Thandar. The killer fled the scene, and Thandar hadn't spotted that it was actually her work colleague. When investigators quizzed her about any potential enemies that Mark may have had, she mentioned Kevin almost as an afterthought. She said, "There is a fellow at work who has an interest in me, but he would never do that." A jury recently found Kevin guilty of murder, and he will be sentenced in November.
These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so we all know how the Titanic sank and snapped in half. But have you ever wondered what it looked and sounded like? If so, the video I'm about to show you is a pretty accurate description of what it looked and sounded like at the moment the Titanic snapped in half and sank. A survivor also said that they can't even go to baseball games anymore because it reminds them of all the screams the night of the Titanic. Here's the video, and it's pretty disturbing. So yeah, that video is absolutely disturbing. Just imagine being there while the Titanic's sinking in the middle of the ocean at night. It's something straight out of your nightmares.
According to reports I found online, George Mubayed, who ran the account HairZone700, has recently been arrested for being a pedophile. There are a bunch of sources you can go to find this information online, but this is one of them. So according to these articles and these investigations, George was using his TikTok account to lure minors into his shop. And this was a ring. He was one of the heads of the ring. According to the reports, there were other members that were on TikTok that would actively work to get children into the shop. And they would all then participate in grapes against the children, which would be recorded, filmed, photos would be taken, and these photos would then be sold and posted on the dark web for other pedophiles to enjoy. Now, I did notice that the HairZone700 TikTok account is gone, which I thought was strange because it had 700,000 followers, so there has to be some truth to all of this. But they do have a Facebook page. I don't know if this is something new or what. And disturbingly, there are photos and videos that are being posted. This one was just posted 2 or 3 days ago, showing the accused man with a bunch of different children. Now, I don't know if these are re-uploads of content or what's going on with all of this, but these are really serious, staggering, disturbing accusations. And it does make sense. I mean, these videos are goofy, they're humorous, they're engineered to entertain children. So I'm going to keep you guys updated on this situation because if you go read the articles, it's especially disturbing. And yeah, I'm going to keep on top of this.
This teenager killed his ex-girlfriend for a free cooked breakfast. Back in 2010, 15-year-old Joshua Davis was in a relationship with Becca Aylward. The pair were the same age and they both went to Bridgend High School in Wales. Rebecca, who was known to her friends as Becca, had dreams of one day becoming a barrister. Upsettingly, throughout the relationship, the schoolboy had been aggressive and controlling with Becca. He'd even sent texts to his friends bragging that one day he might kill her. On one occasion, one of Joshua's friends replied saying that if he did so, he would buy him a cooked breakfast. Chillingly, Joshua would later say to his friend, "Don't say anything, but you may just owe me." In October 2010, despite the pair having broken up, Joshua told Rebecca he wanted to meet her at a local woods. Alarm bells rang for Rebecca's family when she failed to return home that day. No one knew that she had been lured to the woods by Joshua for him to kill her. He had beaten her to death with a rock. Her body was discovered the following day at 9 a.m. face down on the ground. The same day that Joshua had killed Rebecca, he sent texts to her phone to make it look like he was concerned about her. However, the truth did eventually emerge. Thankfully, Rebecca's parents knew that it was Joshua she was intending on meeting, so police investigated him. They confiscated his phone, and the evidence on the phone was enough to arrest him. Joshua and his friends tried to blame each other for the killing, but he was finally found guilty of the hideous crime. Shockingly, he only got 14 years in prison, and the 14 years is nearly up.
This doctor in Kansas was recently charged with an incredibly disturbing crime. Meet Brian Albers. Brian is a pediatric neurologist in Kansas City, Missouri. Before his arrest, this is where he worked, at the Overland Park Medical Center. In doing some research for this TikTok, I saw a number of photos of Brian working closely with children. It's pretty disturbing to see him in these circumstances, given what I'm about to tell you. Well, on November 15th, 2023, Brian was charged in federal court on CP or CSAM charges. Allegedly, Brian had been recording children with hidden cameras. The police also discovered text messages that Brian had sent that read, "I'm going to jail. I'm going to lose my license. I do not want to die. I do not want my kids to see me dead." According to the person who actually reported this crime, they were asked by Brian themselves to head to the hospital to retrieve his electronics. Brian then asked the person to destroy these electronics because they contained, quote, bad stuff. Upon searching these devices, the authorities discovered something disturbing. They discovered over 1,006 explicit videos. Brian had been recording videos of his young patients using hidden cameras from December of 2020 all the way up until October of 2023. And yeah, you heard me say that right. He had over 1,000 videos on his devices. I think that makes these news reports that are still online that feature Brian interacting with children all the more disturbing. So Brian was taken into custody on November 16th, and the FBI is now actively asking people to provide any information they have about him. And I don't think the future looks too bright for Brian.
This woman murdered a teenager because it was on her bucket list. It was 2016 and Gemma Lilly was 26 years old. She was obsessed with serial killers and she'd emigrated to Australia 6 years earlier back in 2010. She was originally from Lincolnshire and had a troubled upbringing. Her fascination with crime and horror was a dark one, and disturbingly, she even put murdering someone on her bucket list. Her housemate was 44-year-old Trudy Lennon. She was actually introduced by a mutual friend to Trudy. Trudy had been struggling financially and actually had 2 children to feed, so the pair decided to live together in order to share bills. At this point, the women started sharing disturbing fantasies about killing someone. Some of these were even documented in the online chats that the pair had. They used the code names SOS and Corvina. Within the space of just 3 weeks living together, the pair hatched a sickening plan. Terrifyingly, in the days leading up to the plan, the pair bought a circular saw, bleach, cement, a drop sheet, a large plastic barrel, and some acetone. Trudy identified their victim. Aaron Page was friends with one of Trudy's sons, and she decided they would lure him to the flat. They used the excuse of needing Aaron to come and install some games onto their computers. As he obliged, Gemma came up behind him and strangled him with a wire. She then stabbed him 3 times. They buried him in a shallow grave and attempted to cover it with concrete. Aaron was reported missing on the 14th of June after failing to return home. It was on the 20th of June that police were able to track Aaron's last call to Gemma's phone, which led them to investigate her. They searched the property and found Aaron's body along with a knife and the saw. Police even found CCTV evidence from Gemma's own CCTV camera. In 2018, both women were sentenced to life with a minimum term of 28 years.
The German pedophile campsite is one of the most disturbing stories I've ever researched. A pedophile ring was operating at a campsite in Germany from 1998 to 2018. What was happening was a group of men was luring children to this campsite. Disturbingly, the kids' ages ranged from 3 years old to 14 years old. And once they were at this campsite, the cameras were turned on and the children were violently sexually assaulted. All on video. Once the kids were there, they were promised laptops, horseback riding lessons, bicycles if they complied with the abuse. And sadly, for 2 decades, nobody listened to these children. Some of the kids' parents even tried to go to authorities, but they never looked into this seriously. This disgusting group of men lured a group of underage boys at one point to a garden shed, and they then kept them locked up in there with no food or water for days. And these men would take turns going into the shed and assaulting each child one by one on camera. This footage was eventually uploaded to the dark web, and hundreds, thousands of pedophiles across the world clicked on this, downloaded this, and saved this to their sick collections. So like I said, this was a hardcore pedophile ring being operated at this campsite. Now, the authorities claim that they caught all of the men responsible, but who really knows? This was a period of 20 years that these crimes happened over. And there was a recorded 450 different sexual assaults on children. And those are just the assaults that the authorities actually know about. But disturbingly, we still don't know what these perpetrators look like, and the public doesn't even know their last name. That's because German privacy laws protect them. So this is Adrian V., one of the pedophile ring's ringleaders. But in every photo of these guys online, their faces are blurred or they're obscured. And like I said, their full identities have never been released. I don't know what the point of that is, but it's got to be one of the dumbest laws that I have ever read about. Oh yeah, and you ready to get angry? The two men at the top of this pedophile empire who had victimized 23 children over 450 times, a lot of those times on camera. They had destroyed 23 different childhoods. They were sentenced to 14 years in prison. Another one was sentenced to 12 years in prison, and another one was sentenced to 10 years in prison. So for that many assaults on camera, footage that's shared to the dark web to thousands of other pedophiles, for destroying the childhoods and lives of 23 children, which are going to be people, adults, the maximum sentence received was 14 years. This should upset you, this should offend you, and this is definitely concerning because just a day ago, Germany lowered the minimum time that you need to spend in prison, 1 year, to 6 months if they find CP or CSAM on any of your devices. So they just recently decided to punish pedophiles less severely. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast that I co-host with my wife, Courtney, Murder in America. It's available now on all streaming platforms.
I've worked with pedophiles for years. Do you know where they get their sexual images? The Wall Street Journal published a huge article on parent-managed minor accounts.
So this is one of the most disturbing rabbit holes I've gone down. I would definitely go check out that woman's TikTok who first brought this to my attention. But I want to explore this article that she's talking about. So what you see behind me are real comments left on the posts of child influencers. Basically, what a child influencer is a kid who's not old enough to sign up for Instagram or Facebook, so their own parents make them an account and manage it for them, which for some reason is legal. So in the article, they discuss how more suggestive content gets more comments and likes, and that pushes these parents or guardians to post more racy stuff, more racy images and videos of their own children. But how disturbing, they're making these racy posts and people are commenting, it's like a candy store or God bless Instamoms. And these parents even said that when they report predators to Instagram or Facebook, they're typically met with silence or indifference. But it seems like these parents are really trying to shift the blame. I'm just going to let you pause and read that. That's a description of a real photo that was posted on a child influencer account. And just look at these comments. These are real comments left by adults on a child's Instagram photo. But it doesn't end there. So the New York Times didn't actually want to show the photos that they're talking about. So they just described them. A 7-year-old girl faces the camera in athletic shorts and a top doing a standing split in front of a wall. I mean, just read these. These are all real photos posted on these accounts. And there are so many examples of these disturbing posts. These parents and guardians are posting these disturbing images of their own kids online for financial gain. Now, even more disturbingly, only accounts with more than 500 followers and multiple images of children in form-fitting or revealing attire were included in the analysis. I mean, just look at some of the posts that were on these accounts. Pause to read. And the authors of this article actually used software to determine which of these images were racy. Surprise, surprise, it was most of them. I mean, how disturbing is this? A girl in early adolescence opens a lace robe to reveal a string bikini with ruffles on top. She looks at the camera in heavy eyeshadow, making a kissy face. These are parents posting this of their own kids, knowing what they're going for. And these are some of the comments that are on that post. But even more disturbing is the fact that these parents or people that run these accounts actually offer exclusive subscriptions. So men, or rather anybody, can pay these parents for exclusive videos and photos of their children. Obviously, these photos aren't fully graphic, but they are oftentimes more racy and more suggestive than the ones they post publicly. Some of these parents even offer people online the chance to chat or speak with their child for money. And disturbingly, they also sell their children's used leotards, cheer outfits, and other undergarments and clothing. So obviously in these articles, they discuss how parents know that they're producing content that might get some people excited, mainly pedophiles. And they continue to post it, they continue to push to see how graphic or racy they can get, and all they care about is the money. They don't care about their child, they don't care about anything. I mean, truly, I would recommend you go read these two articles. It's one of the most disturbing kind of deep dives I've done in a while. And it's wild that absolutely nothing is being done about this problem. It's wild that this is legal. I mean, this should definitely be illegal. And yeah, this is haunting stuff. This is the most notorious priest in all of Australia, Bernard McGrath. And because people roast me for this, he is considered to be the notorious offender in the most notorious religious order in Australia. And yes, he's a pedophile, of course. Bernard was born in 1947 in Christchurch, New Zealand, and his father was a butcher who was previously involved with the church and wanted his son to live a life according to God and be involved with the church himself. So in 1968, Bernard took his vows, and in early 1969, he became a scholastic and worked in psychiatric wards. Keep in mind, he had taken a vow of chastity, but he reported that during his time here, he had a sexual relationship with another man, a fellow priest named Brother Berkmans Moynihan. So in 1974, he was transferred to the Maryland School in Christchurch. The prior at the school was Brother Roger Maloney, and apparently in his years at the school, Roger had fostered an environment of sexual abuse and terror. Roger Maloney would eventually be convicted of child sex abuse, but he allegedly forced Bernard to perform sex acts on him, just to keep his job. But even though written complaints were made about Roger and Bernard, nothing happened, and Roger was eventually transferred to the Vatican to work as a pharmacist. And after sexually abusing kids at this school, Bernard was transferred to another school for disadvantaged kids. By the way, this is a picture of Bernard and Roger, if you were wondering. So in 1981, Bernard became the headmaster of a school named Kendall Grange. And it was here where he had access to hundreds of disadvantaged boys who lived there on property. And he sexually abused a majority of these young boys. Parents made complaints that they heard that the headmaster was touching their children, but nothing was ever done about this. In 1992, however, Bernard was brought to a meeting with Father Brian Lucas. At the time, a lot of people had been reporting that priests and brothers had been touching children inside of churches, so Lucas was kind of the figurehead for the church's response, and he was trying to remediate all of these actions. And when Bernard met with him, he said that there would be a lot of allegations coming out against him, and so he was sent to a rehabilitation center in America. But then in 1993, legal troubles began for Bernard. All of his victims began to come forward, and he was imprisoned for a number of years. This would be his first of 5 different trials that he was involved with that lasted from 1993 all the way up to 2019. And in total, he would be sentenced to about 68 years in prison for over 100 counts of abuse against boys. Obviously, he abused hundreds of children, but these were just the accounts that they could prove. And some of these accounts of the abuse are absolutely horrific. I can't read them here on TikTok, but he did terrible, terrible things to these young children. So Bernard was a part of the St. John of God order, and there were a ton of different members of this order that were eventually convicted of child sex abuse. I mean, take a look here. These are just a few of the members that were convicted eventually as well. But one of the most shocking things about this case is the cover-up. So as far back as 1977, people were reporting that Bernard was touching children in these schools. And even though this was brought up to many people in powerful positions, they always transferred Bernard, attempted to silence parents and other people that were reporting this abuse. And yeah, they never reported him to police. Thank God, though, that now he's in prison. A real man of God.
This is by far the worst video to come out in 2024, and this is a massive trigger warning. The video that I'm about to explain was released extremely recently, and it comes out of the current civil war going on in Myanmar right now. It's pretty long, lasting 9 minutes and 58 seconds in length, and it was recorded in the middle of the night in a rural location in Myanmar. As you play the video, you see 4 captives sitting on the road, and all of them have their hands tied behind their backs, and they are all surrounded by rebels with a variety of weapons like knives, machetes, swords, and guns. A few seconds into the video, one of the captives who is sitting on the ground is being interrogated by a rebel who is carrying a makeshift machete, but despite this, it's insanely sharp. While he is interrogating the victim, he takes the machete and attempts to slice off the man's left ear, though you can't see it because the left side of his face isn't facing the camera. However, the man with the machete then begins to slice off the victim's right ear with the machete, which is able to be seen. The machete cuts through the ear very easily, and in a second his ear is hanging off his head by a couple of strands of skin as blood leaks. The killer continues to ask questions, and you can tell the victim's voice changes. It sounds like he's trying to fight back tears. The man with the machete continues to question the victim and pokes the machete hard into the victim's face, and blood leaks more. The victim tries his best to answer the questions, but you hear him struggle to hold it together due to the fear of the situation and the pain he is in. The interrogator then begins to get angrier and angrier and raises his voice. He then pulls the victim's head down, which exposes the back of his neck, and he hits the area twice with the machete. Then, as the victim is hunched forwards with the back of his neck exposed, the man with the machete stands up and strikes the back of the victim's neck with the blade extremely hard. It almost totally decapitates him.
The man's body then falls to the ground, and the only thing keeping his head on his body is the skin on the front of his neck. As the victim's body lays on the floor, blood begins to puddle. The second victim is then interrogated. He's on his knees with his hands tied behind his back. He's leaning forward, exposing the back of his neck as the killer with the machete holds the blade against him as he asks questions. The killer isn't patient at all with the second victim, and after a few seconds, he takes the machete and brings it down very hard on the back of the victim's neck. It cuts through the spinal cord, making a loud cracking sound, and it technically half decapitates the man, and he was instantly killed by the machete hit. The killer with the machete then strikes the corpse's arm 3 times below the shoulder, and the arm is almost completely severed as blood continues to stain the ground around. A couple of other rebels then enter the shot and begin stabbing the victim's corpse. They continue stabbing and hacking both of the victims' corpses, and one is even decapitated, and the head is held up to the camera. The final 2 victims are then interrogated as they are surrounded by rebels. And at this point you see just how much rebels there are. There has to be at least 15. One of the final victims, who is a bald man, already had both of his ears severed and blood is dripping very bad. The man to his right then has both of his ears severed, but at this point something really strange happens. The bald man, whose ears have been severed, then randomly begins to bleed a lot more. The dripping blood from his ears then turns to multiple streams of blood. Think of it like poking a hole in a water bottle and squeezing it. The man to his right then out of nowhere gets hit with the machete in the back of his neck and falls to the ground, and he is instantly killed by the blow. The corpse is then stabbed multiple times with a sword. The rebels then point knives and swords at the bald man as they mock him. They seem to be very interested in how he is bleeding. Streams of blood are spraying from both of his severed ears even after all of these minutes. And as the video ends, one of the men swings a sword into the side of the bald man's neck and it drops him, and the video then concludes. This video is just inhumane and brutal, and I don't recommend searching for it. It's by far the worst war crime caught on camera, and it's definitely the worst video to come out in 2024. And as we know, there has been plenty of awful videos. This video is horrific on every level, and the emotions and feeling it gives off is truly awful and just sad.
Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. The case of Richard Trenton Chase is a story which even the most depraved horror writer would struggle to create. Over the course of 4 weeks spanning across 1977 and 1978, Richard Chase took the lives of 6 innocent victims in Sacramento, California. His murders gradually progressed in violence, beginning with drive-by shootings and culminating in acts of cannibalism.
Okay, yeah, our timelines are definitely messed up. I just learned that Oxford University in the UK is actually older than the Aztec Empire. So here's part 3. And before we dive in, I just want to thank everyone who listened, because we are number 6 on the charts. So when Oxford was founded, they still thought the sun revolved around the earth. And they didn't know gravity was a thing for another 500 years. The last guillotining not only happened after Star Wars had already come out, but some of them were actually filmed. The last person to be executed by firing squad in the United States was executed the day Toy Story 3 came out. This one's crazy. William Shatner, James Dean, born in the same year. Harriet Tubman could have heard that the Titanic sank on the radio. And Shirley Temple could have had an Instagram account. And lastly, someone who witnessed Lincoln's assassination in person later went on to talk about it on a CBS game show.
Notorious BTK killer is a prime suspect in 2 unsolved murders. Dennis Rader, the convicted BTK killer, is back in the headlines after officers have been digging up his former backyard. The 1976 missing persons case of Cynthia Kinney from Oklahoma has sparked the search. The investigation has apparently uncovered possible connections to other missing people and unsolved murders. These have taken place in Kansas and Missouri, and police believe they are potentially linked to Dennis. The FBI are now looking at matching up pieces of evidence that they have with pieces of clothing that are in Polaroids that Dennis took. They may be able to then see if the pieces of evidence match the DNA of the victims. They are looking in particular at a distinctive red blanket, which was in a Polaroid that Dennis took. They believe that this may belong to Shauna Garber. Shauna was actually 22 when she was hard and killed in 1990. Her body was recently identified in 2021, hence the advancements in this case.
This haunt has a much creepier history than I thought. I'm going to show you some theories about Barbie that have been keeping me up at night, and I cover all sorts of creepy and true crime stuff, so follow along. In 2010, Barbie released a doll that had a camera on her necklace as well as a video screen on her back. This doll has since been discontinued, but there's a lot of rumors about what happened to this footage when it was recorded. So people have always theorized that the footage was collected and sold either by Mattel or by someone more nefarious. And it's been mentioned how easy it would have been for hackers to collect and sell all this data. The FBI even put out a statement about it. Barbie also released and discontinued the Hello doll, which could listen to children and respond with over 8,000 pre-recorded answers. A lot of parents worried that these dolls were potentially recording their children and then selling that data, but this doll also has really concerning reviews. Like, people say that the doll won't take no for an answer. Like, if she asked if you wanted to hear a story and then you said no, she would actually push back and then just tell you the story anyways. And the doll would also ask really specific and targeted questions about children, like how big their families were and if they had any siblings. Was this doll just collecting market data on children, or was it something much weirder?
This teenager is accused of killing his ex, then sitting in a room with her corpse for hours. 18-year-old Natalie Martin was just like any other young girl letting her hair down after graduating. She was recently on holiday celebrating with a group of her friends after graduating Philo High School in Duncan Falls, Ohio. They were staying at a rental home in South Carolina. Natalie's ex-boyfriend, 18-year-old Blake Linkus, was also there with the group. The pair had actually broken up in February this year, as apparently Blake had grown violent. On one occasion, he, quote, took her and threw her across the room. On June the 5th, the day before her death, Blake and Natalie had apparently been arguing because he found out she'd been texting someone else. On the fateful night in question, the group had been out clubbing when Natalie decided to go home because she felt unwell. Blake also went back with her. Around 9 a.m. the next morning, Blake came out of his room covered in blood. He was shouting that Natalie wasn't waking up. Blake had seemingly stabbed himself in the chest after killing Natalie. When two members of the group tried to attempt CPR on Natalie, they said it was way too late, she was cold and stiff. This suggests that she had been deceased for a long time and Blake had seemingly sat in the room with her corpse.
When I was 12, I took the lives of my parents and brother. I am Jasmine Richardson, and this is my story. I was born in Alberta, Canada in 1994. I grew up with my younger brother and we were a happy family. That changed when I met Jeremy Steinke, a man 11 years older than me, at a punk concert. Jeremy had a tough life. His mom was an alcoholic. His dad abused him and he believed he was a 300-year-old werewolf. He was into the gothic scene and always carried a small bottle of blood with him. Jeremy and I fell in love, but my family did not approve of him. When my parents forbade me to see Jeremy, we decided to do something terrible. In April 2006, we decided to kill my parents. Jeremy killed my parents in our home and I killed my younger brother. We ran away, leaving our home covered in blood. The next day, a friend saw a body through our home window and called the police. At first, they thought I might be a victim too. But they soon realized that I was a suspect. They caught us later that day in a town about 130 kilometers away. I was given 10 years in jail because I was young. And Jeremy was sentenced to life, which means 25 years in Canada. In 2016, I was released from jail. Now, I live somewhere unknown under a new name. During my time in jail, I wrote letters to Jeremy. In those letters, I showed no regret for what I did. Instead, I told him I wanted to marry him when I was divorced. But a police officer asked why I killed my brother. I simply said I did not want to grow up without parents.
This is one case that still haunts me. The story of the disappearance of Jason Jolkowski is one of the weirdest things that you'll ever read about. And it's haunting because to this day, this mystery has never been solved. So let's take a look at it. So this is Jason Jolkowski. He was born in 1981 and lived in Omaha, Nebraska all his life. And this story takes place in 2001. So on Wednesday, June 13th, 2001, Jason was called into work early. So initially, Jason planned on walking to his job, which was 4 miles away, due to the fact that his car was in a repair shop that day. But he eventually made plans for a friend to meet him at a high school that was nearby. So this high school, Benson High School in Omaha, Nebraska, was only half a mile from Jason's house. Literally an 8-block walk. And that's where his friend was supposed to meet him. So just take a look at this photo. This is the exact route that Jason was going to take to the high school. It's only a 10-minute walk, and keep in mind, he was about to make this walk in the middle of the morning in broad daylight. In a city like Omaha, Nebraska, where crimes like disappearances and murders don't really happen all that frequently. So at 10:45 a.m. that morning, a neighbor saw Jason helping his younger brother with the trash outside of his home. And at some point right after that, he left to go on this walk to go meet his friend. And during this walk, Jason vanished off the face of the earth. So to this day, no trace of Jason has ever been found. There were no remains ever recovered. Nobody has seen anybody that's ever looked like Jason. Nobody reported seeing somebody being abducted on the day that he went missing. Nobody even reported seeing anything out of the ordinary. It's as if he simply vanished literally into thin air. They even checked the security camera footage from the school that he was supposed to be walking to that day, and the security camera videos showed that Jason never arrived. It was somewhere on that half-a-mile walk when he vanished. Now, Jason's parents have suggested that they believe he may have been abducted and killed, but with no body ever having been found, that theory is just really hard to prove. And yeah, it's been over 20 years since this happened, and no trace of Jason has ever been found. That's why it's a case that will haunt me. I mean, it's just scary to think that you can be making a half-a-mile walk in the middle of the day, in the middle of your city, and go missing, and no one will ever even find a piece of your clothing.
Deconstructing Christianity is not a fad. Hey y'all, I'm Jordan. I was raised in a very devout Christian home. I was a worship leader for 10 years. I was a missionary, and I am currently deconstructing my relationship with Christian culture and the Christian faith. And the fact that I'm doing this publicly and that I am documenting in real time my questions and what I'm wrestling with has caused a lot of Christians to be extremely upset, hurt, angry at me. I get a lot of messages saying that I'm a stumbling block, that I'm just trying to cause strife, that I'm trying to derail people's faith, none of which is true. And just recently I heard an angry Christian talking about deconstruction and how it's a new fad right now and that all the millennials in their 30s are doing it because it's a bandwagon and it's the chic, hip thing to do. And the truth is, yes, there is a huge movement going on right now amongst millennials, people in their late 20s, mid 30s, even up into their 40s, of people who are completely pulling their faith apart, kind of like an old car that keeps smoking and keeps breaking down, you know? They're literally taking it down to the nuts and bolts and pulling it apart and going, okay, what isn't working? And yeah, I'm sure there are some people that are kind of jumping on it just because it's a talking point and it's something that makes them feel special, but as a